live on Facebook and on Zoom. So, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to everyone who's joining us. Thank you so much for joining us on your Sunday. Really excited for today's program. We have a really great panel lined up for you guys. So my name is Raniah. I'm the Programs and Outreach Director for CAIR Florida. And we want to start off by saying welcome and Eid Mubarak to all the Muslim brothers and sisters out there. For anyone who doesn't know, Eid is one of the two big holidays that Muslims celebrate. This holiday coming at the end of what is the 10 days of pilgrimage, or 10 days in which pilgrimage happens. And of course, this year, Muslims across the world weren't able to travel to Saudi Arabia like they usually do, but it was still, 10 holy days. And so we're celebrating this weekend, our holiday from this past Friday. And we thought, what better way to celebrate than to take this opportunity to educate our communities about part of our faith and how we live our lives based on the values of our faith. So thank you guys for joining. We're really excited. I'm personally, I haven't been this excited for a program in a while, just because our lineup really is amazing. I know some of our guests and I don't know some of our guests, and I'm excited to meet them today. But I have to say that at CAIR Florida last year, we had released our Appear campaign to teach the community what it is that CAIR Florida does. And CAIR, for anyone who doesn't know, is a national federation of independently run chapters. It's a civil rights nonprofit, so we defend everyone's civil liberties. And what CAIR Florida did was, through our Appear campaign, we said that we do 5 main things. We advocate, we protect, we prevent, we empower, we activate, and we represent American Muslims. And when I think about that last piece, the R, representing, I really can't think of better examples of Muslim women, of representations of Muslim women than the people that we have on today's panel. And of course, Brother Omar as well, who advocates on behalf of American Muslim women. So I'm really excited that you guys are going to be able to hear from them. And I just want to share, before I turn it to our guest moderator, Sister Zahra Billoo, before I do that, I want to share kind of what was the reasoning behind putting together this panel. And what happened was, actually in CAIR Florida, we had recent cases of Muslim women whose hijabs were removed when they were arrested. And you'll actually get to hear from some of those women on today's panel. But this is not actually a new issue. We've dealt with this issue in the past as well. Even college with Muslim women who are being, arrested for unpaid parking tickets have had this happen to them. And this has actually happened across the country as well. We've seen this happen, as well as women just being discriminated against because of their hijabs. So when you're a very visibly Muslim woman, a lot of it has to do with the lack of education around how grave that action is and what the meaning of hijab is. So a lot of it is we try to educate, prevent the discrimination, right, and protect our community from discrimination by educating people about our values and our practices, and as well as advocating for different policy change. So we're going to hear a lot today, and I don't actually want to take any more of the time, and I want to get to our panelists. So thank you guys for joining. Any questions throughout the program? If you're joining via Zoom, feel free to put them in the Q&A section. And if you're joining via Facebook, put them in the comments, and we'll be monitoring those as well. And we'll have a section at the end of the program for audience Q&A. And then without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to our guest moderator, Sister Zahra Billoo, who you guys may know as the Executive Director of CAIR San Francisco Bay Area Chapter. She is, mashallah, a civil rights attorney and social justice activist, and has been for many years. So we're so grateful for you for joining. Thank you so much for moderating today's program, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Raniah, and really the whole CAIR Florida team. I know we can see Raniah, but there are others who worked hard to make today's program possible. When they messaged me and they said, we're doing this program, I said, it's Eid weekend. And they said, well, what better weekend to talk about the practice of our faith and fighting to protect it. So really excited to be with you all. Raniah froze, but the rest of you are still moving. So I know the tech is working. Okay. So as Raniah mentioned, my name is Zahra. I run the CAIR San Francisco Bay Area office. And aside from, wanting to do this conversation or have this conversation because it's so important to protecting our rights, something that I was thinking about as I joined the Zoom earlier is that it was actually 30 Hijri years ago that my family went on Hajj for the first time. And it was that trip that facilitated my mom beginning to wear her hijab. which then facilitated me wanting to wear hijab. At the age of 7, it wasn't a legal or political or even a religious decision. It was just cute. And I wanted to be like my mom. We had bought a bunch of hijabs that were bright colors and had the beads on them. We just brought them back from Saudi Arabia. And I was like, well, if she's doing it, then I want to as well. Of course, in the 30 years since then, hijab has become so many more things to me: religious, political, and even at times a form of resistance in and of itself. And so this conversation is timely personally, but also in the context that we are in. We've got a great panel of speakers today. We've got Sister Alaa Massri, who is a CAIR Florida client and community activist. Sister Zahra Muhammad, also a CAIR Florida client and community activist. Rowaida Abdelaziz, a good friend and also a national reporter at the Huffington Post for Islamophobia and social justice. Check out her Twitter feed. If you're not already following her, you're missing out. Rasheedah Muhammad, a fashion designer for modest wear and an entrepreneur. And then Omar Saleh, a brother and ally who is a CAIR Florida attorney. I'll start off by actually asking each of the speakers to make a brief introduction, tell us about themselves, and either why you wear hijab and what it means to you, or, I mean, Omar, I can tell you don't wear hijab, so what your connection is to the fight. And we will actually try to go in alphabetical order. So Alaa, if you'll kick us off.
Okay, so I am Lebanese. I'm 19 years old. I attend school as a pre-med student at USF in Tampa, actually. And I've been an activist for about 2 to 3 years now, and I'm the street medic leader from all of us.
And can you say a little bit about why you wear your hijab or what it means to you?
Yeah. So to me, I believe that there's this misconception about the hijab, you know, the idea that women are objectified when you're, you know, talking to a woman who wears a hijab. You're saying, you're propagating the idea that this precious and valued things are wrapped and hidden away, which is typically, you know, the metaphor that's given to a woman who wears hijab. But the truth of the matter is that we're not objects, regardless of how valuable you think they are. It's the idea of needing to be separate from your sexuality, hence the modesty and hence the hijab. So for me, it really puts an emphasis on showing that you can stand along with your community members, and you're visibly a Muslim woman, where people can feel more trustworthy and people can feel comfortable around you, and to, you know, advance the idea of a community, a Muslim community, and inclusivity within our society, which is especially needed in America nowadays.
Thank you, Alaa. Next up, why did I commit to alphabetical? Because now I have to make sense of that. Rasheedah, tell us a little bit about yourself. Oh, you're muted.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Just want to say thank you to CAIR Florida and Raniah. I appreciate the opportunity for this event. But I'm a fashion designer, yes, and owner of Haya Fashion's online boutique. I'm also instructor and founder of the Young Designers Academy, where we teach young girls how to sew and design and empower them in entrepreneurship also, and also board member of Muslim Women Organization, MWO. And with that being said, we do a lot of work in the community. We work with many women on all aspects, from the Young Designers, Haya Fashions, and MWO. Why I feel as though I wear hijab and why it's important to me, because one, I feel as though I love to see myself and others wear it, of course, but I feel very beautiful in that sense. I feel beautiful, powerful, and there's not an emphasis on anything else but the words that are coming out of my mouth, my intelligence and my power that you will hear me speak. I also feel as though Allah does speaks about the hijab in the Quran, but for women and for men, our hijab is actually a covering from our head to the toe. So without it, I don't feel complete. And I actually want to make sure that I am definitely most pleasing to my creator.
Thanks, Rasheedah.
Thank you.
Next up, we've got Rowaida.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me, and super excited to just talk and engage in this really amazing discussion with an incredible lineup of diverse opinions and backgrounds. And so, like Zahra mentioned, I'm a national reporter at the Huffington Post based in New York City. I cover Islamophobia, anti-Muslim rhetoric, and the intersection of gender, culture, and politics of Muslim life. So it's a lot to keep me busy, but I'm incredibly blessed to be in a position in mainstream national news and elevating a lot of the stories that come out of our communities, which is extraordinarily diverse, and there's always something incredible to cover. And so last year, actually, I had dedicated that year, 2019, to Muslim women and covered a lot of stories about the challenges of being a Muslim woman. And I think from that, oftentimes, we know that a big portion of our community wears hijab. And so I've done a lot of stories on that. And so when I think about my personal hijab journey, Zahra was very much like yourself, where I put it on because the women that I looked up to in my life just happened to wear hijab. And I saw this as a milestone and just wanting to emulate them and saying, well, if they're doing it and they look incredible and they can do those incredible things, then I want to do it too. And I think it's fascinating that our generation, right? Like this is how we internalize and process hijab, whereas now hijab has become this very politicized, hot topic conversation. And so the hijab is something that is deeply intimate and personal to me and is a direct line for me and my creator, and what has become, or what was or still is deeply spiritual and religious and meaningful, become this topic of political football. I think it's fascinating to me, and so excited to engage with you all on the topic today.
Thanks, Rowaida. Zahra, is your sound working? Can we?
Yes, I am so sorry. I can't seem to get my camera to work. I tried different, computers, phones, but I can't get it to work. So I guess everyone can hear me, right? Okay, hello, my name is Sarah Muhammad, and why I wear hijab. I was born and raised in America, and wearing the hijab to me is part of my religion. Usually women wear it when we hit puberty. I didn't start wearing hijab until I was 29, when I got pregnant with my first child, my first baby girl. I guess you really don't know, you don't grow up and think about who you really are until you are trusted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God, and think about, and you wanted to bring up, you didn't want to raise a child and preach different parts of the religion if you're not acting on it. So I didn't really want to do that. I wanted to raise my daughter, letting her know that, teaching her the right way, the wearing the hijab. I've had a lot of people come up to me all the time and ask me, aren't you hot? You're all covered up. Don't you feel uncomfortable? Can you breathe under there? I always tell them I feel great. I feel like Allah has blessed me. It's like an air conditions over me. I live in Florida. I feel very cool. I feel like, I'm representing the American women. The hijab has even become the best part of dressing up for me. I can proudly say that this has been a part of who I am for the last 20 years. It's who I am. It's my identity. Alhamdulillah, my daughter started wearing the hijab since she was 11, and now she's 24 and she still wears the hijab. She used to play basketball in high school. She actually got accepted at the university in FAU to play basketball. And she wore the hijab throughout all of that. I was very proud of her to do that. And unfortunately, she had many concussions, so she wasn't able to finish her years in the university with the playing basketball. But she proudly played, and she proved to the hijab women that, we can do anything. We can do anything we put our mind to. Like you say, people look at us and think, can you play sports? Can you do activities? What do you guys do? Do you go to the beaches? Do you go to the pools? Yeah, we can do anything we want to do. We're not different, The beauty of living in America is that we are told we have the freedom to follow our religion and our beliefs. Hijab to me doesn't make me feel weak. If anything, it makes me feel empowered. And I think that's the best part about living in America.
Thank you so much, Zahra. Omar, clearly the odd one out here. Who are you?
Everyone, yes, I don't know what it feels like, obviously, to wear hijab, but I do, at least for this moment, I know what it feels like to stand out, and it's just, I know it feels nothing like, our sisters, who stand out from day to day wearing hijab. My personal story is going to involve, those Muslim women who are closest to me, that being my mother, who started wearing hijab when she was 40, and I remember that day I was 9 years old, and I thought to myself, I never told her this, but I thought to myself, well, Mom, we're going to stand out. And I took that, looking at her as a tremendous sign of bravery, us being in the United States. But, at my age, I also understood that it was, her personal decision, and that she was doing it, like Sister Rasheedah said, for the purpose of making her creator happy. And that's something that I took to learn, alhamdulillah, in my quest. This is really not about me. It's mostly about the tremendous panels and sisters who are with me now. I'm really humbled to be a part of it. I'm just here because Sister Alaa and Sister Zahra are brave enough to stand out and stand up to the discrimination, to the treatment, and to let people know, like women who are Alaa's age, and do the things and activities that Zahra do, that we have to stand out, and we have to stand out and be positive. But so it's a pleasure to be here, and inshallah, we're excited for the rest of this panel.
Omar, I hope you don't mind. I mean, I think all of the women on this panel have been in the situation where we're the only woman on the panel, surrounded by men. And well, frankly, on a Sunday afternoon, on Eid weekend, if I'm running low on jokes, you are just going to be the target of all of them.
Lay it on. I hope.
But we appreciate your allyship, and your work, which we'll talk about, inshallah. A number of you alluded to this. Alaa, you talked about the perception of women who wear hijab being seen as oppressed. Rowaida, you referenced hijab and Muslim women's rights now being a form of political football. I'm curious if others of you, or even if you all, want to say more about what are the Islamophobes saying about hijab? Like, let's just put it out there. Like, what are the things that get said about wearing a headscarf? I see Alaa unmuted herself, so I'm hoping she'll join.
So the narrative that tends to surround the hijab, especially, in Western civilizations, is that it's a means of oppression, wherein I see it that every woman has the bodily autonomy and the right to choose what it is that she wears. And so, in my case, where they just took it off in front of hundreds of males, that was not a form of showing that a woman, they're taking away that oppressiveness away from me. Rather, they're oppressing me and choosing to do with their power in a means that controls a woman's body and a woman's choice to, wear what she wants, because regardless what it is that you wear, you have the right to do so. And it's not oppressive if it's your choice. And I think it's more so just bringing light to the lack of control that they want to take away from a woman.
Exactly. I agree. I think that in that exact example is that somehow people are intimidated by that exact power that you have, that we have wearing our hijab. That if you decide, if the law enforcement decide to take it off, it's as if they're trying to remove something that maybe they're intimidated by, or that they know is very powerful and very close to our hearts. And it's a way of having the control, or at least they think the control of doing that. As we all know, who is in control. But when you feel as though you have the power to do that, to intimidate, to think that you're intimidating someone else by doing that. You're actually intimidated yourself by the power of just our beautiful hijab.
Absolutely. I think just echoing what both women have said, it really is the perception of hijab goes back to the larger conversation of policing women's bodies. And this is something that is not exclusive to the US. We've seen it in France and in other countries in Europe and parts of the Middle East. And so whether it's a forced putting on or taking off, there's this wider conversation of telling women what to do and how to dress in the very specific context. And that, of course, all goes back to power and exuding control. And we see it, whether it's from people in power, like law enforcement, like you mentioned, Alaa, or just day-to-day people who feel like they have the right to tell a woman in a grocery store or on, in a bikini on the beach, or just going about her daily life, what she can and cannot work, her profession, and letting her know what she can and cannot wear. And so we definitely have that aspect. And of course, the very stereotypical assumptions of oppression, and that Muslim women's voices don't have autonomy over their own bodies. And we've seen the complete opposite of fetishization, almost, where we fetishize a Muslim woman in hijab, and this coming from a very white savior, very patriarchal, misogynistic male gaze as well. And so it seems like you can't win either side, and it's not like it's a problem on one side of the political spectrum. We see this issue on both sides. And I think both women said earlier, what it comes down to is stripping away a Muslim woman's autonomy to choose to dress how she wants, when she wants, and where she wants. And I think this has been an ongoing conversation that we've been having for a really long time, and it's quite unfortunate that we still haven't been able to reach a consensus where a Muslim woman can feel comfortable, at least from a legal perspective, because we all know Muslim women who are empowered and feel comfortable in their choices, but not consistently be policed.
So the funny thing about moderating a panel on Zoom is you can't really see anyone's body language. And so there's sort of like, okay, give them a second, see if anyone else is going to chime in, and then go forward. And so, I mean, thank you all for highlighting what and how Islamophobia manifests when it comes to the targeting of hijab. Rowaida, to your point about it's not exclusive to one party. I mean, one of my earliest post 9/11 memories is the Democrats talking about the need to invade Afghanistan to liberate the women. And very often what we saw on television at the time was the images of the Afghan women in the blue burqas, right? No question of whether that's their choice, what is the culture on the ground. I mean, I'm not even saying that some weren't oppressed. For sure, some were. Just statistically, women are oppressed everywhere. But the idea of connecting their burqas and their hijabs to the need to not just liberate them, but to invade their countries, bomb them, kill their men, women, and children, so that we could liberate them. That connection always strikes me and reminds me that unfortunately the desire to police women's bodies is something that we see across borders and across parties, and something that we're constantly pushing back against. We can start with you, Omar, on this one, but I definitely want to hear from others as well. How are civil rights in the US today impacted around the question around hijab? What is that connection? What is happening there?
Yeah, I mean, it differs across the nation and even across the state. Before Alaa, we've had several calls at CAIR come in of hijab-related issues, not just in law enforcement, but in the workplace. One of the most significant ones that CAIR worked on was for a sister by the name of Hakima Benati. She's not on our panel, but she, walked into a Domino's Pizza and was accosted and was later arrested, not for anything other than the way she looked. People looked at her, and the first impressions that people get nowadays when they look at somebody in Islamophobes, when they look at somebody wearing hijab, it's just a direct sense of fear and intimidation. It's based a lot, largely, if not solely, on ignorance, and that's why a large part of our work that we do here isn't just litigation; it's advocacy work to educate the public. But before Alaa, we received calls from people like Sister Zahra, who is in a very unfortunate situation and currently has a pending case ongoing. So we're careful not to discuss that. But in terms of any legal claims against municipalities, there have been several. I'm sure Sister Zahra, you know of some in California. They filed a lawsuit years ago, and I believe also in New York. While we haven't, CAIR Florida doesn't have any active cases involving removal of hijab, we have received several calls about them. And a lot of our work, if doesn't only involve litigation, but advocacy. After Alaa, because of the widespread attention that it's garnered, we've already received commitments from several counties in Florida that they'll start implementing procedures, maybe because it was the attention, and not for anything else. But other counties are not. And Florida has 67 counties. Each one of them deal with these cases differently. But I should say too that I'll give you an example of something that happened just a few weeks ago, where we were in an unfortunate situation where somebody that we knew was going to get arrested, not a CAIR client, but an individual who we knew. And I happened to be there during the arrest, speaking with the detective, who was a female officer. And I told her, to the sister who was about to get arrested, who was wearing hijab, I said, look, when you were taking her downtown, you should know that her hijab is part of her sincerely held religious belief, and it's a part of her. Our sister, she wasn't good at communicating or even knowing her rights or being able to assert them, or even identify them enough to tell somebody in law enforcement what hijab means to her. But I can tell you that when it was conveyed to the law enforcement officer that, look, the person that you are arresting who's wearing hijab wears this because of her sincerely held religious belief, and we're asking you to do the right thing. The officer looked at me and she said, look, I know, I'll try my best, but I can't make any promises. I said, well, look at the news, because this was only a couple of weeks after Alaa. And I told her, there's one thing is to clear somebody and clear someone for security. And it's another thing to identify somebody. The booking photo during an arrest is for identification purposes. So there's a lesser restrictive means of achieving that purpose of IDing somebody, that is taking the booking photo with the hijab on. Security is different. If you have to pat somebody down, you might have to remove the hijab, although it should be done with the females, not visible to males, and certainly not taking the booking photo in that course. Why? Because there's a difference between security and identification. And alhamdulillah, we looked at the online the moment that the mugshot was taken, and she had her hijab kept on. That was from a county where in the past they hadn't done it. And I think not everybody's going to be in the situation where there's an attorney standing in front of a police officer letting him know that, hey, you got to do the right thing, and this is why not. And even if an attorney does do that, doesn't mean they're going to do it in the first place. But I think what's so important, and is why I believe it's so important, like Sister Alaa, who really just, I really think had it not been for that arrest, maybe we wouldn't be here speaking about hijab, although it's such an important issue, that we need to be able to assert our rights anywhere. I mean, we're not just talking about Muslim women who get arrested, but also Muslim males who need to know how to assert their rights as well. Alhamdulillah, we've had successes in Florida related to beards in the institution, equally as important. And it starts with educating the public as to what people's rights are, and then there are public officials as to what's illegal and what's not.
Thanks so much. Thanks for walking us through some of that overview. I wanted to take one step back, actually. Raniah messaged us and she said, hey, let's not assume everybody knows what's going on here, and let's add a little bit of context. And so really quickly, just as an overview before we move to some additional questions for the panelists, a lot of us use hijab as short form for the headscarf, but it actually has a broader meaning, right? So it means modesty, it means partition, it impacts not just how we dress, but also how we interact. And hijab is an obligation on men and women. The Prophet, peace be upon him, once described his community and his followers as having the unique characteristics of modesty. And so, keep that in mind as you meet Muslim men and you're like, well, they don't have to wear hijab. It's like, well, actually they do. It just looks different for them. Or if, by the way, you meet Muslim women who don't wear headscarves, that doesn't mean that they're not adhering to modesty. They may be choosing to do it differently. So with that in mind, then, those of us who choose to wear headscarves do believe that God commanded women to dress modestly, and then described that modesty, not just in the Quran, but also in the teachings of the Prophet, peace be upon him, as including covering really everything except our face, hands, and feet, and even feet varies based on the school of thought. I really like my summer sandals, and so we could have a conversation about that offline. So Muslim women wear it because they choose to, because they believe that the religion requires it, because they think it's fashionable, because they want to stand out. There are so many reasons that Muslim women wear headscarves, and we heard Alaa and Rasheedah and Rowaida and Zahra share some of those. So it really just varies. And my advice to people who are not Muslim is, if you see someone wearing a headscarf and you want to know more, well, don't just go up to them in the grocery store line and ask them what that thing is on their head, but develop a relationship with them, get to know them. And when it is appropriate, then feel free to ask. You will find that many Muslim women are willing to have that conversation if you ask from a place of sincere curiosity. Is there anything else that you all would consider adding about why you wear hijab or what hijab means? Oh, and sorry, so as I mentioned, hijab is short form for headscarf, not technically, but colloquially. So you will hear Muslim women refer to, well, my hijab this, or I'm a hijabi, or she's a hijab wearing woman. But again, my hijab is broader. Just in this case, it's also the most visible part of how we dress modestly. It's very surprising to me how few people will ever ask me, like, why are you wearing pants? Because the pants just blend in, or why is your shirt long? So that just blends in. It is part of the hijab, but they will ask about the headscarf. Anything any of you would add, hijab wearing panelists, about that for background and context, in case anyone didn't know?
Well, I think a lot of people, like you said, like you were talking about, I was a subject of an arrest, and I wear the hijab all the time. And the only time I do not wear the hijab is when I'm at home. In my religion, the only time I can have the headscarf off is in front of my kids, my belated husband, my brothers, my dad, So at home, I'm free to be without my hijab, To have my headscarf off in front of other men makes me feel naked. Wearing the headscarf is who I am. I get ready every night matching my clothes with my scarf. As men get ready, probably matching their ties to their suits, or women, but I love getting ready, getting prepared the night before, matching my scarf to my clothing, what I'm going to wear the next day. The scarf is who I am. It's a part of me. And without it, I don't feel complete.
Mm.
It is a part of my religion to wear the headscarf and in front of other men. Being modest, just like you mentioned, and conservative in front of other men is part of our religion. I feel I am looked at with respect. And when I'm wearing my headscarf, I don't feel the shame or in any way. I actually feel very proud. I feel great representing my religion, and I love when I'm approached and asked, why do you wear the hijab? Why do you wear the headscarf? And like you said, a lot of them refer to it like that thing on your head, but it's a scarf, and I love wearing it, and I love people when they ask me about it. So that's it.
I'm going to come back to you, Zahra and Alaa, to share a little bit more about your experience with the arrest in a few minutes. But let me jump to Rowaida for one more zoomed out question, if that makes sense, a 30,000-foot overview. I'm curious, Rowaida, how you would explain how hijab has been portrayed in the media, particularly in Western media.
I think that's a great question. When we're thinking about Western media, I think we're still in a learning process as to how we understand what hijab is and how it's portrayed in media. I think, like you mentioned, and a lot of the discourse was really brought into frame after, when we're talking in the context of the war on terror, after the September 11th attacks. And I think it unfortunately began as this oppressive thing, and that even just the sheer images shown in media. I think when we're thinking about the mainstream coverage of whether Islamophobia or Muslim issues, it is so many layers. It's not just the content of a story. It is the photo that accompanies the story. It's the headline that goes with the story. It is the people who are chosen to be quoted. And I think all of these sometimes, just kind of goes over most people's heads. But for the longest time, anytime we talk to Muslim women and hijabi women in particular, they were speaking over and not speaking to. And I think that was the biggest problem there, that we were talking for them. We were talking about their struggles and their anxieties and how they're forced and oppressed in so many contexts in their home countries and in the US even still. And we only talk to Muslim women who wear hijab when it comes to just hijab, right? We're not looking for the full holistic value of Muslim women who are also lawyers and doctors and educators and parents and sisters and wives. And so I think this is a core issue that we continue to see, the very archaic, very old stereotype. And then the second, I think, stereotype, we've seen this swing in journalism, and I find this on the problem. Like I said, this is not like a right problem or a left problem, but a lot on the left, where when we talk about Muslim women in hijab, we frame this I would say it's well-intentioned but poorly done types of journalism of, well, this hijabi Muslim woman is doing this amazing thing, but she could only do this amazing thing here in the US because we grant her the freedoms to do so, right? So a very white savior type of coverage, again, framing the Muslim woman and hijabi Muslim woman as conditional. And I think we haven't reached a point where we're giving a woman her full autonomy and to be her whole self. And we're talking about a Muslim woman's whole self, that yes, her hijab and her Muslim identity are a part of her. And that's something that should be respected in the court of law and outside of the court of law. But she's also so much more than that. And I think this is really the stage that we haven't gotten to yet. I think we're getting there. And I think we've seen progress, and that progress has come with more reporters of color, more hijabi women, and more women redefining and kind of telling their own stories. And having more hijabi women and Muslim women writing their own stories, writing these news articles, where we start to see less of this hand-holding basic journalism and more of this holistic view. And so I think I appreciate the progress that we've taken to get there, from the old school archaic Muslim women, hijabi women are oppressed, to the whole conditional Muslim woman. And we're starting to look at them in a holistic sense, and that they are valuable, who they are in their authentic, honest self, and they don't need to dilute it in any way.
Thank you for that, Rowaida. Rasheedah, another sort of critical and cutting edge conversation around this is the fashion industry and how it interplays with hijab in terms of modesty, but also our headscarves. Can you share more about how you've been designing modest clothing and how that's been a part of your identity and lifestyle in this context?
Yes, I think first of all, like women's or modest fashion is just weaved into my identity from a young age. My mother was and still is, she's a designer. She taught me how to sew, and most things that we used to wear then was everything that she made. So it was a way that started us in dressing modest. And from that, I went on and, took designing in school and became a fashion designer and have the online boutique. But I would say that modest fashion is, most people will look at it as a trend right now, right? It's very, like we're busting out, like we're in different fashion designers, like modesty is on the line, it's on the list when it comes to collections that's being rolled out, swim caps, Nike, everything. Like we have our beautiful Muslim sister, the model, who's out there representing in very modest fashion. But I would say that as with anything, when it's something new, it's not originated by people in power. Again, there's intimidation, there's discrimination. But as a Black woman and as a Black Muslim designer, it's just a natural duty of mine to design modest wear. I just hope and pray to Allah that I set the example, especially with my customers. I mean, I sew and design for women, all walks of life. And there'll be some women that may ask me to make them certain kind of clothing and things like that. But if it doesn't represent modest fashion, it's not something that I design. While I think it might be beautiful and I love, and they may be beautiful in it, it's just not something that I do. And that goes back to the reason why I wear hijab, because everything that I do, from my design, from how I dress, how I speak, I want it to be hayat. I want it to be a form of modesty. And I love my customers because, customers from all different walks of life. Like I said, we indulge in different kind of conversation, whether it be on a spiritual level, fashion level, business level. And it's when we can get together like that and we can share our experiences as it relates to fashion, that's, to me, what it's all about. Because therefore we're moving forward in a very diverse atmosphere where we're all respected, and our dress code. So for me, our jewels are definitely hidden. It's beautiful, it's intelligent, and it's also the power that we have. And before we even speak is what you see. And that's, to me, is the fashion. What you see, you're gonna judge us in that way. You're gonna judge anybody in that way. And as a modest designer, that's the way I want to be judged first. And I would love my customers to be judged first in that modest form, inshallah. Oh, you're muted, Zahra.
I was going to say, when I started to wear hijab, it was very much because we had gone to Saudi Arabia for the first time and had found these like really pretty, bedazzled, colorful headscarves that I just had not seen before as a kid. And this was now 30 years ago. Today, I very much rely on modest fashion designers in the US. I also prefer to support local small businesses, in part because I know that your products are made ethically, right? So something else that's come up, by the way, as we think about like intersectional approaches to justice, is that when Nike makes these products, are they making them in sweatshops? Are they using the slave labor of the Uyghurs to do it? And so when I think about modest fashion, because I come to that from a place of faith, it's also important to me that my role as a consumer in that conversation is one that's also driven by faith. And so thank you, Rasheedah, for everything you do to make modest fashion both ethical and accessible to all of us. I know that in the context of COVID, many of us are missing going to Islamic conferences where we would buy all of these things. And so looking forward to checking out your online shop, inshallah.
Inshallah. As Sister Zahra, may I add one more thing?
Yes.
Because you we spoke about different corporations.
Yeah.
And as I challenge myself and other modest designers, we need to make sure we have a seat at the table when it comes to fashion and it comes to different corporations that are that they think they are leading the way in modest fashion. When it doesn't matter how small of a business we are leading the way. But if we have a seat at the table as it relates to those corporations, we have a say in what is rolled out. And therefore, we know that in big corporations, it's not just about the fashion right there. There's so many more political things that are weaved into those issues also.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
No, thank you so much for that. Yeah. None of this is to say that we write off big fashion, but rather we figure out how to engage it and really hold it accountable and expose it when it veers off track. Next up, Alaa and Zahra, with your permission, I'd love to ask you to share a little bit more about your experiences. I know it can be re-traumatizing to share what's happened, but if you're comfortable, I'd be curious, and I know our audience would be really curious to understand what happened to you, right? You made headlines. We saw in different parts of the country outside of Florida that something was happening to both of you in terms of your experiences with hijab and law enforcement. But tell us what happened, how it made you feel, and then what message you'd want to leave law enforcement and or the public with about it. Alaa, can I start with you since you're already unmuted?
Yeah, so that was around the second or third week of the Black Lives Matter protests. And to date, it's been around 63 days of ongoing protests, and I've been to around 34. So I've been very active in that sense of advocating for Black Lives Matter. I'm also the street medic leader. So my role every time I go out there is to make sure that everyone's safe and sound, because there is a lot of experiences with police brutality. And it was honestly a very chaotic day. One thing led to another. There was around 50 cops just running, chasing all of us. And I got hit by a police car. And then a couple minutes later, I saw a police car approaching another group of protesters, and there was a guy who was bleeding on the ground. So I ran across the street to try to aid whoever got hurt. But I was stopped by around 6 to 8 police officers in riot gear who just kind of picked me up, punched, kicked me a few times, and then took me away in the prisoner's transport van. And, once I had gotten to the jail, I was surrounded by maybe 100 other males or so and I was still handcuffed, and they ripped my hijab off. Even after multiple times of me, pleading with them, saying this is my religious beliefs. A couple other people who were arrested with me also, were telling them those are her religious rights. You can't necessarily do that. And then I didn't have it on for the remainder of the 7 hours that I was in there. I was detained for 19 hours, and for 7 of those, I was in a room with around 100 other males without it on. And that entire experience alone, sitting in there, was very traumatizing. And being surrounded with so many, strange men in a situation where you're so vulnerable and you're stripped of your identity and like how you choose to portray yourself. I've been wearing my hijab for 11 years. So every morning I wake up and choose to wear it. And the fact that they were just able to take it away and then not only take my booking photo without it, but broadcast it on national TV, that was just like adding even more to the entire experience of how my picture is out there on the internet forever, which is completely against, my religious, spiritual beliefs, but also my rights as an American citizen. So I just kind of want to go ahead and make use of my case to where it will never happen to another woman again, because that's the end goal, you know, so that this discrimination and injustice doesn't happen again.
If you had a message for law enforcement, what would it be?
I think I would say for them to be more educated, you know, on other cultures and other beliefs. And in this world where we're all coming from so many different backgrounds, it's important to understand that every person is different, but understanding how to respect people's boundaries, how to respect people's cultures and religions. And, you know, as long as I can leave them with a sense of, oh, I understand, you know, her beliefs, I understand the significance and the value of the hijab. So, you know, that education is vital when we're fighting this movement and, you know, wanting it to move forward.
Thank you, Alaa. Thank you for sharing that. And for continuing to push back. I do really, truly hope that your pain can be a source of strength for everyone on the front lines, and particularly people who are most impacted. Zahra, are you there? Can you talk to us about what happened in your case?
Sister Zahra, I'm sorry if I may. Sister Zahra does have a pending case, and she's also been an attorney who we discussed in that. As for now, it's best that she'll stay within as the context of the fact that the subject of an arrest, and unfortunately her hijab was removed, and it was one of the most traumatic experiences of her life. But she's gonna leave it at that. No, unless, sorry, do you have anything to add besides that? I don't think she does. So for her protection in her pending case, she's just
sure. Can she offer, I guess Raniah is saying that, can we ask her if there's a message that she would have for the public? Not about her case, but about hijab and its importance to her.
Zahra? Maybe if she gets back on, we can keep going.
Okay, great. So then, Omar, you talked to us a little bit about the cases that CAIR Florida is working on. Is there anything that you would add about those?
It just really boils down to educating the public. I mean, I'm the last person here who's gonna say, you know, what it means to wear and how important the hijab is to you. I just look at you guys the same like I look at my mother. I don't have sisters other than real sisters, other, you know, than you. So I'll protect those rights. When I go out, you know, when I was young and I shop with my mother, I always kind of looked at her as that badge of courage, walking with that hijab on. And this was a pre 9/11 world when that happened. We're in different times right now. Discrimination is a lot more rampant, and it's affecting kids as young as an elementary school, you know, all the way up the ladder. I would say, you know, that the message is that Muslim women are going to continue standing out, but making sure we stand out in a positive light, you know, to see Sister Rowaida, not just because of her hijab, but offering tremendous journalism. And Sister Zahra, everybody knows, you know, what you do for the California community, and Sister Rasheedah, you know, this is what it's all about. I wanted to make, this might be my only opportunity to talk about hijab and fashion. So I wanted to just add one more point, if I could, about and it was dovetailing off of Sister Rowaida's comment about the learning process with Sister Rasheedah's comment about making sure people, the important people, are at the table. Because when I was hearing it, I thought about two main things. One, I mean, we all have, you've probably seen the pictures in Target that show the hijab wearing women, which is great. It's a great feeling. Are the vendors, you know, who should be there, and people participating in that there. And I think that's maybe I immediately thought about a big company like that. And then speaking of media, not just news media, but Hollywood. I've been thinking about this when we were having this discussion. This one show, it's called New Amsterdam. It's a medical show that depicts hospitals. And the reality is, alhamdulillah, a lot of our Muslim women are in the medical professional. So you see in Hollywood, you see a lot of women wearing hijab, but sometimes it's like I see almost every episode or almost every scene or so many scenes, and I think, well, what is the true purpose of that? Is it for representation only, to show that accurate representation, or is it, maybe to get another market, of viewers? Just something to think about. Sorry to delve on that, because I'm probably never going to be able to touch upon that subject in a Zoom conference nonetheless, but
no worries, Omar. I think the additional piece I would add, Rania, for those of you who missed the first few minutes of the Zoom, is also with CAIR Florida, and she's behind the scenes moderating, and she's like pinging us and being like, do this, do this, do this. But the additional thing I would add, just so that we're clear, and for me, as someone who's a civil rights lawyer and wears hijab, I hope that everyone that's tuned in will take away that the law protects your right to wear a hijab. The law is imperfect in the United States, for sure. There are gaps that are plenty across the board. But in principle, you have a right to practice your faith, so long as you are not harming others. And so if you are at school and someone is telling you that you must take your hijab off, in a public school, they're really not allowed to say that. Call CAIR, we will fight for you. If you are in your workplace and someone is saying that you cannot wear a hijab, let me tell you that we've had lots of success fighting workplaces to ensure that you can wear your hijab, whether it's a retail clothing store or a restaurant or the medical profession. You have the right to wear a headscarf, and an employer who says you can't sometimes acts out of just ignorance. They don't understand that the law requires them to allow you to wear it. Sometimes they act out of malice, and we approach those things differently. But in the end, the key outcome for us is that you have the right to wear it in the workplace. And then you have a right to wear it in law enforcement interactions. You have a right to wear it in travel interactions. And so we have frequently gone up against federal authorities when they've tried to harass women getting on planes wearing hijab. We've also, as you've seen in the work that Omar has talked about, but also that Alaa and Zahra have lived through, that law enforcement cannot force you to remove your hijab. This can be really tricky and it can be really scary. Anytime I'm telling someone who has a gun and a badge that they are wrong, that can be very intimidating. And that's what organizations like CAIR are here for. So that should something like that happen, we want you to speak up. We want you to say, I'm wearing this for religious reasons. And we also want you to know that you can call us for help. To the point about the law being imperfect, in many cases, the law is a patchwork of different sets of laws that vary from city to county to state. And this isn't just, by the way, a hijab issue. I've been talking to people about rent moratoriums right now in COVID. So if you're not going back to your college campus in the fall, but you're stuck in a lease, what do you do about your apartment? And people will be like, well, can't the lawyer in this city answer the question about the law in that city? And it's like, well, no, actually, because the way housing laws, unfortunately, have built is that they vary from city to city. So you really need someone who is on the ground where you are. The same is true when it comes to hijab protections. There are some baseline things, like employers are required to make religious accommodations, but how each jail treats hijab, how each police department treats hijab varies from locality to locality. And so it means that when we're fighting for change, we sort of have to do it piece by piece until we can build momentum to really get system-wide or nationwide changes. And so if you are tuned in and you've experienced any of what we've described, or you know someone who has, please tell them to contact CAIR, tell them to tweet at Rowaida, tell them to speak up. The law, I'll say this over and over again because it's so heartbreaking to me as someone who spent 3 miserable years in law school. The law isn't perfect, and the law isn't always the solution. The law is one tool in our toolbox. Telling our stories is another tool in our toolbox. Having a seat at the table with major corporations and advocating for policy changes from the inside is another tool in the toolbox. But none of these tools are useful if you don't tell people what happened. In the case of Alaa and Zahra, we know that they came forward, and that is what, in fact, led to the movement and the groundswell that is now hopefully going to facilitate longer lasting change in those experiences. Is there anything else any of you would like to add about the law or our right to wear hijab before I move to some audience questions? Or Raniah, I see you're back on. Is there anything you would like to add?
Yes, I'll jump in, but I saw that. Thank you, Zahra, for giving me away, Sister Zahra, in the background, given the cues. But before I chime in with some of the great audience Q&A that we're getting, please keep it coming. Sister Rasheedah, I saw that you unmuted, so why don't you go ahead with your point first?
Well, before we start the Q&A, thank you, Raniah. I just wanted to say to Sarah and Alaa, I can't imagine going through that and like to hear, I don't know Sarah's whole story, but I know it's still horrific and it's traumatizing, and I pray to Allah that things work out really, really well, and from this comes some significant change. But to Alaa, I just want to say, because you're 19, and I work with a lot of young girls your age, and I can't even imagine what you went through. Like, as you spoke about it, I just imagine, like, you put very vivid images in my mind, and very clear images in my mind. And I just want to say, from the work that you're doing on the grounds, I pray Allah protect you and keep you strong and keep going. I commend you, and I'm not there with you, but I'm there with you.
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I mean, thank you, ladies. No, I mean, honestly, I just want to say thank you to Sister Zahra for moderating so beautifully, much better than I could have. And to each of you, I took away from each of your responses, honestly, new perspectives and very important information that I know our audience has appreciated as well. Just to highlight like a few of the things that you guys have said about, you know, even the message that you had about, you know, for law enforcement, that they could be more educated. And this is something that's been tried and tested, right? So even CAIR Florida, we had a program starting in Tampa where we trained police officers about that, you know, about Islam and about the cultural nuances that they should be aware of. And then we found that officer who had even removed hijab from a student then was remorseful and saying that, you know, I never realized what I was doing. I was just kind of following policy. And again, like Sister Zahra said, it's not always that way. But that when you're able to educate them and then they change their practices, that's one piece. And then like Brother Omar said, you know, we also have worked with multiple police, you know, counties to change their policy, to actually have an explicit hijabi or religious accommodation policy. So these things go hand in hand, the education piece and the changing policy piece. And we hope that, you know, this webinar is a part of that, definitely. So there's been some great questions coming. So I want to get to maybe just a couple, 2 or 3 of them before we wrap up to respect everyone's Sunday. Sister Rowaida, if you have 30 seconds, I was going to ask you to chime in on this last question. I know you have to head out. So what we're going to do is just so everyone, we can hear from everyone for these questions, if everyone can give maybe a 30-second answer. So the first one I wanted to share was that someone's asking, you know, sometimes these tactics that we're seeing with law enforcement or in media or in any workplace, you know, that we're going through are tactics of fear and intimidation, right? Kind of used to maybe discourage us from exhibiting our religious freedoms or from taking advantage of our religious rights. So do you think that these are fear tactics that are being used to prevent or discourage women from wearing hijab? And if so, you know, how should we take that? So Sister Rowaida, maybe if you want to give us your response and then head out. I really appreciate you joining the panel.
Yeah, and I wish I had more time. I do have another thing to hop on, but I think that's an excellent question. You know, I'll leave the legal advice to the experts. We have plenty of them to do that. But I think what has been incredibly important to know from my experience is that when it comes to Muslim women's civil rights and it comes to intimidating Muslim women, that it is absolutely a losing battle, whether it's through the CAIR cases or other cases that we've seen. Law enforcement agencies, universities have had to settle because it is a clear violation of the law. So I just want the Muslim women to know that absolutely it is wrong, and they are no way should feel pressure to be intimidated or to it is absolutely a fear tactic, and they shouldn't be afraid, and that they have multiple avenues for protection, whether it's reaching out to an organization like CAIR, whether it's reaching out to a journalist and a reporter and say, you know, I've faced an injustice and it's not getting enough attention and it needs to be elevated, so that other Muslim women, you know, people who read Alaa's story, who read Zahra's story, and it requires great courage to go public and to be involved in such a national and international story, is awe-inspiring. And I've had plenty of other Muslim women who feel maybe intimidated to just go to school, let alone deal with, you know, law enforcement or go swimming in some of these small daily practices, and they get that empowerment from one another. So I think it's incredibly important that we continue to speak up. And in addition to the women, because oftentimes we put so much pressure on, say, the victim of these cases, but having allies, male allies, like Brother Omar, who's here, non-Muslim allies who choose not to be bystanders, who are there for women and those who face injustices. So I think it's incredibly important in order to overcome a lot of that fear and that intimidation that is exerted by those in power, whether it's law enforcement or at a university, or like I said, at a grocery store, that there are other people who, even if they don't understand the complexities of the law or the faith or religion, that there is a commonality of standing up for what's right and reporting something that happens. And I think all of that, when we communally work with one another to tackle an injustice, this is when we are going to see great progress. And so thank you for that question. And if that's okay, I'm going to just use that one to head out. But this was an incredible panel, and thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Rowaida. We really appreciate it. Anyone else want to hop in on that question? Zahra, you as well, you'll be incorporated into part of the panel now before we kind of move on to the next one.
I was going to hop in quickly, only because I might forget it if I don't say it. And it was on the point that Sister Zahra made about hijab is not only limited to the headscarf, and that same issue can be encountered in the arrest situation, and it's one that we encountered a few weeks ago in dealing with the good news story, where the sister actually took her booking photo with the hijab on after, you know, we sat with the officers. But I hadn't realized until the sister told me. You know, I was actually at the jail, and she said, Omar, well, I got my hijab, but also my sleeves, you know, I need a long sleeve to cover my arms. And you know, we went back, spoke with the officer in charge, and they gave her a sweater. But, you know, I didn't realize that too, that when we say hijab, we're not just talking about the headscarf, because she still felt, you know, she still felt naked, even with the headscarf on, but the corrections shirt was too short. So it's things like that too that we look at. But again, I'm just here because Sister Alaa stood up and Sister Sarah stood up, and we just have to continue to stand up to standing out.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brother Omar. Okay, so another question that I want to pose to you guys from the audience, speaking of allies, so one of our, that Sister Rowaida brought up, one of our allies has mentioned that, you know, one of the tropes that she's heard is that Muslim women wear hijab so that we don't tempt men. And then you kind of see this as the issue of policing women's bodies, right? So, and she kind of compared it to dress codes in schools and how, you know, girls are given dress codes so that they're not distracting to other boys. And she knows, she's learned from other Muslim women that that's not the reason, like we had discussed previously, that's not the reason why Muslims women wear hijab. But what can you guys say about, you know, regulating what women wear in public spaces? Because we see that coming up more and more often, right? And it's open to anyone.
I mean, I'm a bit of an extreme libertarian on this one, where I don't believe it's the government's place to regulate how we dress at all. And so people will ask me sometimes in San Francisco, because we deal with questions of nudity, in San Francisco, like all out nudity, right? We don't live in a Muslim country or an Islamic state. And as such, if I don't want the government to tell me how much I must cover or uncover, then that means I must also be willing to be uncomfortable around other people's choices. We live in a very pluralistic society. And so who decides, and how do we decide, and what is an agreeable baseline? So if I'm willing to impose my baseline on someone else, then how is it appropriate that we don't let them impose theirs on me? And so I am opposed in the United States in 2020 to government restrictions on how much we wear or don't wear, in fact.
And to piggyback on that for the other panelists, thank you, Sister Zahra, is what about even like within the Muslim community? Sometimes we see the question of like how you wear hijab, and so even policing like who wears it and who doesn't, or how women wear hijab, especially Sister Rasheedah, because you know you're in the fashion industry, so a lot of times like how you express something is going to be different from person to person. So does the same thing, kind of the same principle hold, do you think?
I think that is preference. I think that the way we wear hijab, I sometimes think that, are we women drilled about our hijab and the way we cover it like men? Like, are men drilled the same way? And most of the time it's not, you know, because of other reasons. But I think that we all come from different backgrounds, different cultures. Like we have women that may cover and wear hijab a certain kind of way, and that's the way that they were raised to cover that way. I think ultimately, whether we're Muslim or not Muslim, or we're of different faiths, we all need to, and I'm speaking of all women, we all need to be grounded in reading our books, you know, because in all of our books, it does say for women to be covered certain kinds of ways. And that's just not a Muslim thing. You know, it's a woman's thing that is directed and actually given to us by our Creator. But as far as it relates to, you know, how we cover, if this is shown, if that's not shown, I think that when there is more emphasis on our dress and what we covered, and not more emphasis on actually what the covering mean and what hayat mean and what it means to be modest, even before you cover, that is something that we really need to focus on, because sometimes the focus on just the way we dress and the way we cover is not the very first thing that we should drill into ourselves. Like we, you know, as far as a young women, and I know myself, I struggle with hijab. Like I didn't start to wear hijab until I wore hijab with my, went to a Muslim school and everything. But you know, once you get out on your own, you're now making your own decisions. And your decisions that you're making by yourself, you now have to say, is this pleasing to my Lord? If I do this or if I do that, how do I want to be now? Now, when I made that decision, I was late in my 20s. And so at that point, there were so many ways I will cover before I got to this. And even today, this is not, I may look a different way tomorrow. I might wrap it in a turban. I love colors. I love this. I love so many things. But ultimately, we as women have to make sure that we are doing things that we are very comfortable with. We feel very confident in our dress code. And we know that if Allah takes us at that moment, are we happy with our decisions and the way that we cover and dress? Because that's who we ultimately do it for. And like the other sister said, you know, we do dress in a modest way and we cover in a modest way. And those ways are the way we cover is only for our immediate family, our husbands, our children, and our immediate family. And that's really it. And I think that's such a very prideful thing I take pride in, because it's a sacred thing. So it has such significance and power in covering and wearing hijab. And I think I don't really put emphasis on the way you wear hijab. If a sister I see in the supermarket or something has on a turban or wear a certain kind of way, she may be Muslim, she may not, but I'm certainly going to say, Assalamu alaikum. and I'm going to move on.
Yeah.
And hopefully, whether she is or she's not, she may have left with a good feeling from me, inshallah.
Absolutely. No, I love that. I think you put it perfectly. And thank you, because you answered another question that we had about, why women wear it in front of men, but not in front of other women. And so you put it perfectly. We follow the revelation. And I always say, whenever anyone has any question about faith, there is the faith, and then there is how it is practiced, right? So we are all different, like you said. And I love that you put the emphasis on like why someone is asking that question, right? Like that is often more important than the question itself that's being asked. So thank you so much, Sister Rasheedah. Okay, so I'll also bring it to Sister Alaa or Sister Zahra if you guys have anything to add. And if not, I think a final question that we can end on is, someone that is asking, what message would you have to other Muslim sisters or non-Muslim sisters who are thinking about wearing hijab or curious about it? So we can kind of tie that into closing remarks, and I'll ask you each to give your closing remarks, and then we'll wrap up. So Sister Alaa or Sister Zahra, do you want to start us off?
We can start Sister Alaa, because I think Sister Zahra, you could see her on, but she's not able to comment. She just texted me separately.
Okay.
That she's
Sister Zahra, you can also type your response. We're happy to read it for you. I know that there's been lots of Zoom difficulties during this whole pandemic, so you are not alone. Trust us. And then Sister Alaa, we can go ahead and start with you if you're comfortable with it.
Yeah, so what I would say is, to me personally, I believe, and, also kind of piggybacking off what Rasheedah was saying, how it's not more so on how you choose to dress. It's, that kind of distracts when a person nitpicks on the smaller things of, oh, you should be covering this a little bit better. You should be doing this, you should be doing that. When in reality, you should be uplifting, your Muslim brothers and sisters in a community where they don't feel as welcome in this society. With me, like living in Miami, I'm the only visibly Muslim woman aside from my mom that I know in this entire city that went to my entire high school, so being the only one definitely makes you stand out, but it definitely opens you to a lot of discrimination and a lot of Islamophobia. But it's important that we recognize that there's strength in that, and that being able to stand up and continue to do it on a daily basis, regardless of what everyone else is saying, truly shows the power that stems from you and your relationship with God, and the bravery that comes from that, exuding that to other people and allowing them to see that extent of the bravery that comes from that, I think is also really important when it comes to discussing the importance of the hijab.
Thank you, Sister Alaa, and thank you for joining us and for sharing your story. I know a lot of people were moved by it, so thank you so much for that.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Sister Rasheedah, maybe we'll jump back to you for closing remarks.
I just want to say that I know initially, given when this event was brought to my attention, thank you, Raniah, I felt like I immediately thought of my own struggles wearing hijab and things like that, from discrimination or even the journey of it. But I just want to say to our young people and women that may still be struggling, it doesn't matter your age or anything, like if the struggle is absolutely real. But I do think that, take your time. And I also feel as though you are stronger than you know. You're strong, much stronger than you think you are. And when we do things only pleasing and wanting the recognition from our Lord is when the journey may be a lot more easier for us. But as we know, the people before us had many struggles. But as women, even the young women that are finding it hard to, wear hijab or not wear hijab, our ultimate focus is getting to the place where you are confident and do not ever let anyone steer you away from your own obligation, or if you decide to wear hijab or when you wear your hijab, stay strong in it. And if there's any discrimination, do not hesitate to speak out. As you see on the panel, there's so many resources right here that you can get help, that you can speak to anybody. And I'm here in Orlando for anything, anybody that may need any kind of help. But just remember wearing a hijab is very beautiful. And when I asked this one sister, she don't know, this one sister, this was years and years ago. I know you said 30 seconds, like 5 more seconds. Years ago, my mother was making her something and she was leaving. And I didn't always see her in her hijab, but this day she wore a hijab. And when she was leaving, I asked her, I said, why do you cover like that? I never saw you cover like that. And she said, because I feel beautiful. And she's left it at that. Assalamu alaikum, and left. And this had to be like more than 20 years ago. Like, and from that, I never forget that she said that. And most times people don't think that's exactly how we feel. Don't you see the colors we want to wear and how we fix ourselves up? It is definitely not oppression. It is beauty.
Thank you, Sister Rasheedah. I think that's beautiful, mashallah.
Zahra, she texted me, so she couldn't get on, but she said that, you know, it's a pleasure and it's an honor to be there. And that one thing she'd want to say is that women shouldn't be afraid to stand up and stand out. And she's certainly one who has been. I mean, we're constantly in contact about what's going on with her now. And I'm just going to ask Sister Rasheedah if she could post your boutique link on your chat. I might order something for my mother. This is, you know, it's just, we're happy to support one another, and to the message to the community, we're here for you, from Florida to California, alhamdulillah. So, and any other issues, we're happy to help, and jazakallah khair.
Thank you, Brother Omar. I really appreciate that. And yes, and I could testify, everything Rasheedah has is amazing. So you definitely don't want to miss out on that. And for everyone on Facebook, it's Haya Fashions, rm.com, Rasheedah Muhammad. So hayafashionsrm.com. And then lastly, but not least, Sister Zahra, thank you so much for moderating the panel. We really appreciate everything that you brought to it. And it was such an honor for us to be able to collaborate with CAIR San Francisco Bay Area. And any closing remarks that you have for us, we're going to give you the floor to close us out.
You know, when I think of Sister Alaa's story and Sister Zahra's story, I think of our predecessors who fought with life and limb, who gave blood, sweat, and tears for our right to practice our religion, both like when Islam was created, but also really like throughout history, including in the United States, with the way early African American Muslims fought to practice their religion. That fight is ongoing. It is far from complete. And we know that what we fight for as individuals, inshallah, even as challenging as it can be, as hard and traumatic as it can be, will not just protect us individually, but our community and the next generation of Muslims. And so when I see them fighting, I am reminded of our brave Shiros who came before them. And I hope more and more people will step forward and will be encouraged. When we are working to advance justice and the worship of Allah, no harm comes to us unless Allah wills it, and no success comes to us unless Allah wills it. But our obligation is to make the effort. And so I'm hopeful that more women will step forward, inspired by Alaa and Zahra, and that more people will know that they can call on CAIR to protect them and fight for them and be with them, inshallah.
Inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan, everybody, and Eid Mubarak to everyone again. Sorry, I can't speak, so it's really time for us to go. But I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their Sundays, and thank you to all of our incredible panelists and moderator. And we'll look forward to seeing you guys next week. Next Sunday, we have another CAIR Florida program on elections, local elections, everything you never knew about your ballot. One way for us to make sure that our rights are respected and that everyone's, is treated fairly is through our elections, and making sure that we put people in their positions that are going to advocate for their entire community. So we hope you'll join us next week at 5 p.m. as well. And thank you again to everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.